All right. Hello, Ale. I have, at least we're in the same time zone because sometimes when I talk to our potential partner, they would be somewhere in a different time zone. But we know that it's bright and early. But my basic question to you is, what should our audience know about your fund? Because there are all kinds of you know guesses, and there's still a mystery about what is it, the virtual currencies, what is a blockchain fund, is it still around, are you active? So tell us everything you want to tell us about your fund and yourself. Please
Sure,
go ahead.
absolutely right. So, happy to be here, and always great to chat with a fellow colleague, I guess, in SF. So, in terms of my background, maybe I'll just share that sort of quickly. Um, you know, I started off my career at PwC, first in Toronto, New York, and then moved into corporate turnarounds and helping companies that were about to go bankrupt return to profitability and focus on core growth. Then did an MBA at INSEAD, which is a business school in Singapore and France, and started a tech company while I was there, which did quite well, and we were able to raise 3 rounds of capital pretty quick, grow our team pretty significantly to about 40 people. Ended up exiting that at the end of 2017, and then started Blockchain Founders Fund and ScaleX Ventures. And there's three things that we do, right? So first part is we invest in early stage companies between seed and pre-A. We also invested in another fund called Loyal VC, where we're on the investment committee. Uh, between those two, I mean, there's well over 150 portfolio companies, and very recently, I think just in the last couple of weeks, we invested in one of Tim Draper's funds called Draper Goren Home, and just to sort of continue to expand our network and reach and collaborate with other leading sort of VCs. And
How big is your team? How many people
Yeah, so
are?
on our direct team, we've got just under 20 on the team, and the reason why it's much larger than other VCs is sort of there's two other parts of what we do, right? So I mentioned that first angle, which is sort of our direct investment sort of side. The second part's our consulting side. This one's not a major sort of focus for us, but it is where we work with the United Nations. So we wrote one of the flagship reports for the UN on emerging tech, which we're hoping gets released later this year. Might still be delayed quite a bit with COVID, as you can imagine how it's impacting a lot of these organizations. And then we also, for example, lead all blockchain initiatives for INSEAD as senior blockchain fellow there. And so, helping to also drive from an academic perspective the boundaries of what's happening. And the third part of what we do is our venture program. So our venture program is quite unique. It's where we work extremely hands-on with early stage companies to help them solve three challenges. So the first is around strategy. The second is around product market fit and early stage sales traction, which we help them drive very hands-on with our data science team. And then the third is helping them to get investment ready, and we invest in those investment rounds and help them drive those investment rounds. And this has been very, very successful, and we've got a lot of really great companies. Banks and neobank out of Europe just recently raised upwards of 8 figures on their last round. You know, BeatDap is a music tech company out of Vancouver as well, and they help solve a $4.5 billion problem for the music industry. And they just got ranked in the top 20 music tech companies in the world by Crunchbase. Johnton recently launched the lowest cost health coverage.
Are you industry agnostic? And do you
Yeah.
invest in, yeah?
So we're
What
industry
would
and
be,
geography agnostic. We're about 60% blockchain, by the way, and 40% is emerging tech, and we're 80% B2B. So a lot of our focus tends to be on B2B companies. It's just oftentimes much more difficult, of course, to scale B2C companies. However, we do still have a lot of success with some of our B2C companies, right? Like Splinterlands is the #1 blockchain game in the world, and that's one of our portfolio companies, and they've been very successful at sort of that side. But of course, many people struggle with sort of growing, B2C companies.
But it sounds like you do, I wouldn't say all kinds of investment activities, but you have a direct invest, and you invest in companies, and you invest in other venture funds, and you have all these geographies, and you have your own university. And yet, when you say, if I were to look at the fund without knowing what you do, I see the blockchain and the title. And why did you keep it there?
So we don't have our own university, just correction. We work with INSEAD, which is one of the leading business schools in the world. And in terms of blockchain, I mean, blockchain's a big part of sort of where we started, but we operate under 2 brands, so under Blockchain Founders Fund and ScaleX Ventures. And our venture programs, the ScaleX Venture Program. And so we do have a lot of non-blockchain companies. And the thing is, I mean, blockchain is sort of one technology, right? And in many cases, it's sort of at the core of some of these businesses, but in other cases, it's enabling or creating some sort of value addition, right? But that doesn't mean that every company needs to sort of implement blockchain initially. And so there's a lot of companies in our portfolio that, are looking at blockchain and may integrate blockchain as an additional value add in the future to their customer base, but it's not critical. But at the end of the day, we always have sort of been more focused on emerging tech as a whole. And we see innovation as sort of the timing and convergence of, interesting technologies together. And when that timing sort of really works is where you create like real massive innovation. And so when you start pairing, for example, blockchain with, AI or IoT, it starts to get more and more interesting depending on the context.
Yeah, and like everything goes in waves, and there would be a buzzword, and everybody wants to do that. And when blockchain has been around forever, it's just a ledger, right? But then several years ago, all of a sudden, it became that buzzword, and everybody will say, "Yeah, we're a blockchain company, we're a blockchain company." But now that the dust has settled, now would you tell the audience what do you think? Blockchain is for a business. So when you listen to a company presentation and they say we're a blockchain company.
So first off, I guess we do tell most of our companies to not say they're a blockchain company. And there's actually research that shows that by saying that you're a blockchain company, you're actually decreasing your likelihood of sales. And so it's not something that's supposed to be front and center, right? What you're supposed to be communicating is what the value creation is from this, right? And so if there's decrease in costs or increase in customer loyalty and transparency, like those are things that people are going to care about. And so that's essentially what needs to be communicated. And when you look at, on the enterprise side, as you sort of said, there was this, there was a huge sort of hype cycle, and then you sort of saw it dip down. And so over the last 2 years, you've actually had a significant stagnation in funding on the enterprise side to blockchain. You've seen a significant decrease in number of mentions in, say, earnings calls and board calls. But, we're starting to see that pick up again, right? And you look at, HSBC as an example, they've now moved $1.2 trillion on their blockchain, right? They've done 11.6 million trades for FX settlements, right? You look at what's happening in securities, right? Fatburger had an Ethereum based bond rated by Morningstar, and then I think just in the last few weeks, the government of Thailand did a $1.6 billion bond on IBM's Hyperledger, right? And so you're starting to see more and more happen here. And so we're really excited to see that the enterprise side is starting to pick up. A lot of our companies are more focused on the enterprise side. I mean, we've got companies across all sorts of sectors, right? Like one of our companies, Agrio, they're based out of South America, and they use, geospatial mapping, soil moisture, satellite imagery to measure agricultural crop yields and create credit profiles so that they can work with financial institutions to reduce the risk of their lending portfolios to the agricultural sector and enable them to lend more. And you look at developing regions, 50% of GDP comes from the agricultural sector, right? And so this is very, very impactful. And blockchain is just one part of that solution, right?
Yeah,
And so you got
exactly.
all sorts of stuff like this, right? And they don't go out and talk about how they're using blockchain. It's about communicating the real inherent value of it, right?
Yeah. So you work with companies pretty much in many geographies. Would you say that an entrepreneur from Asia would be different from someone you meet in Canada or in France, or the companies you invest into have the same DNA? How would you compare the?
So I mean, every company, of course, is different, right? But what we're looking for is great founders, great technical teams. So we want to see a very great teams in general, but we want to see very strong technical sides. And then what we're looking for is quite unique. So on the venture program side, we're actually going through and trying to understand the idea, how they're selling it. We usually look at it, usually within a conversation, we sort of might figure out like how this could be sold differently, how this could be sold more effectively, like how we can go after different target or segmentation, or reduce sort of the product build and launch sooner. Like there's all sorts of things that we're doing pretty quickly before we even take in a company, right? And so there's all sorts of those aspects. And then we're also looking at CEO and team coachability. And so this is also quite unique. And it's because the early stage nature of the companies that we work with, they need to be quite coachable, because our hypothesis and our theory is that we're always wrong and so are they, right? And so, it's all about testing and figuring out and failing quickly and learning from it, right? And this applies even to our CEOs that might have 20 years of experience in their sectors. Like they have a good idea, they understand their sectors inside out, they're one of the best in the world at what they do. That doesn't mean that the first idea and way that they structure everything is going to be what their industry is going to adopt, right? And so there's always learning from those customers, and there's always feedback loops that need to be in place to be able to
Yeah,
learn.
right. Well, yeah, exactly. Because you can have the best plan in the world, and then the market changes, then the life interferes, the pandemics happens, whatever. You need to be able to pivot, and only teams that are, as you said, coachable. And it's not that we as investors know it all, we don't. But once you form that partnership, in between an investor and an entrepreneur, it has to be something where you respect one another and right, and you go in the same direction. Because if you look at several ways to fail for a company, the big one will be when the company didn't agree with the board. Speaking of that, do you take board seats or you just invest and
Yeah,
go
we
on?
we we actually usually don't take board seats, and specifically as well because of the nature of our companies are so early. But we know sort of everything that's going on in the companies at an early stage. I mean, the ones in our venture program I speak with every single week, right? And so, we know sort of everything that's going on. We're always helping to drive it forward. We have something called the BFF Global Expert Network, which is sort of what we define as individuals who are among the best in the world at what they do, and they mentor our companies. And we have individuals with multi-billion-dollar exits there, or have been in executive positions at Fortune 500s, et cetera. And so they help our companies a lot as well. So when there's challenges, we always look for people that are smarter than us, more ingrained in those industries, and help and help them sort of open up doors, or at least possibilities, or ways of thinking about problems, right, and how to approach it. And so that's always a big part of our approach. Yeah.
How do entrepreneurs find you? Do you guys advertise or you're well known and people know how to find you? What will be the best way for our audience to reach out? Yeah, how do they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good question. I mean, we do have a relatively public profile, having done a lot of stuff on TV, and we write a lot of content in leading magazines and journals. But people can find us if you go to our website. You can drop us a note. We also, you know, vet and talk to a lot of startups. We're very present at a lot of conferences, etc. For startups that have good ideas that want to share sort of what they're doing, we're always happy to take a look, even if it's really, really early. And we actually, have a forum on our site where startups can share, what they're doing, and our team reviews that every single week, and we get back to, pretty much every single one of those companies. And I know a lot of startups are often frustrated when they don't hear back from VCs or others, and of course, like everyone's busy, right? And we do our best to get back to startups, even if they're not a fit. And in a lot of cases, we give them, advice as well on certain things to look at or keep in mind, right? Um, you can also always find me on Twitter or LinkedIn, etc. So
Yeah, I have a feeling that someone with your profile is an active user of social network for reaching out, mentoring. You probably do a lot of stuff just to educate and the world about, right, not just venture capital, but entrepreneurship in general. And the partnership with NCR, this sounds really fascinating. I have an enormous respect for their programs because the graduates from the INSEAD program are always, well, level up from from entrepreneurs who didn't go. Okay, one good question. When people ask, I get the question many times, how do you get into venture capital? Do you need to have an MBA or what? Well, in your case, you have everything. You worked for a big corporation as PwC, getting that experience. You have your education from INSEAD, but is it necessary? Well, how
yeah,
else
I mean,
can
I
anyone
think
become?
there's always unique paths to everything, right? And everyone's got sort of different circumstances, and you can. I'm very much a believer in you can sort of always create your own path. I think one of the big things for me, and we sort of still see, and I personally still see myself not exactly as a VC, but still more as an entrepreneur, right? And sort of what I'm passionate about is still solving problems and working with our CEOs to help look at different ways of approaching things and how to approach things effectively, and how to test different ways of going about the market or going around other sort of challenges. And so for me, that's what I'm passionate about. And I think having done my own startup and having that experience, and also being exposed obviously to a lot of other startups along the way, I think that's been a big impact. But I think there's always all sorts of these different skills that are just part of that puzzle, but there's just a lot of ways to acquire those skills as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep, pretty much so. Well, it was wonderful talking to you, and hopefully one day we'll meet in person. But for now,
Absolutely.
we'll post your video business card on various channels the Startup Network has. They have LinkedIn and Facebook, and I think YouTube too. And as you said, you're wide open for talented entrepreneurs, and they know how to find you. So thank you so much for the interview, and I'm looking forward to our future meetings.
Thanks so much. Really
Bye.
enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.